The Australian government has passed the Surveillance Amendment, enabling government identity theft. Previously, the Assistance and Access Bill meant telephone companies were forced to install dodgy government accessible apps. Further, local governments have rolled out surveillance cameras with facial recognition, funded by the Commonwealth Government in a so-called trial. Ahoy! I'm John August, Pirate Party Australia. Our party was a response to corporate overreach in intellectual property, together with increased abuse of government powers in the digital age. Be it the abuse of whistleblowers, journalists, the ability to protest, or numerous other activities, our freedoms have been wound back. Our government stands in that dark shadow. While they talk about the dark web, it's amazing how dark they themselves have become. Maybe it's not a police state supporting a dictatorship or one-party government, but life is easier if you keep your head down. That's telling. Yes, crime is an issue. Each bit of legislation can of course be justified as reasonable at the time. But eventually you have to look back and say, where are we and just how did we get here? Today I'll be looking at where we've ended up. I'll also take a look at a connected issue, hypocrisy in foreign policy. It's something I've been both saddened by and amazed by over the years. On paper, these changes are supposed to be done carefully to prevent overreach. But the government has form in ignoring carefully laid out constraints and expectations whenever it suits their needs. John Barilaro, Deputy New South Wales Premier, set the Fixated Persons Unit on public figure Friendly Jordies offsider, originally intended to prevent terrorism. We could well have the first political prisoner we've had in a long time. Police charge minors with graffiti for making chalk marks on the footpath as part of a protest. While it doesn't have to happen, invariably the government twists legislation beyond all recognition. Legislation originally meant to prevent terrorism and pedophilia ends up being accessed in pursuit of much lesser crimes. Departments with their own agenda and a patient that exceeds that of any one minister or any one government get a wedge in and push it further over time. And that's assuming the legislation was vaguely reasonable. The most recent amendment has taken control away from judges, inside of government to the Administrative Appeals Tribunal. And if things are urgent, you can get away without a sworn statement. That's a wonderful word, urgent, sort of like temporary. When it comes to personal freedom, we've had the debacle of Witness K and Bernard Collaery, originating in the East Timor Spying Scandal. We spied on our neighbour to the north, Timor-Leste, formerly East Timor, a very unneighbourly thing, with private interests calling the shots on how our spies are used. At the time, our government was claiming that East Timor was being selfish. Well, we did get their help during the Second World War. How far back do we want to roll back the accounts? We owe both East Timor and the US a debt from the Second World War, but somehow we take the US debt more seriously. We will of course selectively nuzzle up to the powerful. We helped in the formation of Timor-Leste, something the government really didn't want to do, but we, the people, dragged them into it. There's the treatment of whistleblowers and journalists like Annika Smethurst. You know, Richard Brandis asked the Law Reform Commission to report on how people's rights were being compromised by government legislation, mostly to do with burdens of proof in share trading. Strange how the interests of the well-off always seem to be the greater concern. But the report came back, raising concerns about the watering down of the possibilities around whistleblowing and journalism, and the difficulty in defending yourself in court when you couldn't access the classified documents which were part of the case against you. When it comes to freedom of speech, the government has always sided with people who say offensive things which support the government's position, or popular issues that they can get some traction with, but rarely with the freedom to do or say things that criticise the government. Internationally, Edward Snowden revealed illegal surveillance in the US. We've ignored the plight of Julian Assange, who was himself a whistleblower and journalist. And look, we acknowledge that Assange is a problematic and controversial individual. Still, our support is for Assange the whistleblower and WikiLeaks the institution. Much as Assange may have done his wrongs, I feel that people focus on this and ignore the other things he's done. And it's worth recognising that he's been in a committed long-term relationship since 2015. We've done much more to help others in trouble overseas. Our Foreign Minister hides behind claims that Mr Assange will be subject to a due process in UK courts, ignoring that what we have is due process in the application of unjust laws. The Iranian government claimed that Manharan Monis, who committed the Lint Cafe siege, was a criminal. But we didn't take their legal system as seriously as we do some other nations. There does seem to be a pattern. Foreign policy is in fact an excuse to be an arsehole, a bully, one of the last vestiges of royal prerogative. But we can be better, a country that doesn't do the dirty on others when convenient or in corporate interests. We're sold on good Australian values during elections, but this is betrayed when we're not supposed to be looking. Consider China. I for sure have sympathy for the plight of the Uyghurs, Hong Kongers and various others suffering under Chinese rule, and also the story of the silencing of the first person to raise the alarm about COVID. Still, China was doing all this years back, and suddenly now it's a problem? We sure didn't mind all that money coming from China into our universities and mining companies. Drew Pavlou has been pointing this out for a while, but now more people take him seriously. Yes, China is and always was a concern, but now it has our government's attention, independently of whether they are now or ever were arseholes. Into the mix, China has been blame shifting and finger pointing, blaming foreign provocateurs, not acknowledging the possibility activists were genuinely and independently motivated. In Australia, we're not perfect and do not always realise our ideals. Who is? We have the stolen generation, and further back, things like Murdering Ireland and the Mile Lakes Massacre. Still, there's a fair go and letting people say their piece. It's a free country, after all. I don't think you need to be perfect to criticise, just willing to accept your own failings along the way. Make no mistake, the US has long been projecting soft power into Australia, infiltrating our institutions. You might laugh, but they've actually been more subtle about it than China has been. But still, in contrast, the US gets a free pass. John Howard said Hong Kong demonstrators were inspirational, but when 500,000 Australians demonstrated against the Iraq War, he said they were giving comfort to Saddam Hussein. At the time, Simon Crean described his comments as a disgrace. The Prime Minister is questioning the loyalty of more than 500,000 mums and dads. Saddam's was a vicious regime. Still, as vicious as it was, did we actually improve things for Iraqis? And was blundering as we did actually the best way of going about it? Not to mention the weapons of mass destruction that we found. Well, no, we didn't, did we? Before the war, Howard challenged Saddam wanting to keep weapons inspectors out of his palaces. But it was asked, why is that? Maybe for the same reason John Howard wanted to keep UN inspectors out of his own refugee camps. But this sort of thing goes back all the way to the Cold War. It was a time when the red cancer of communism was going to eat its way downwards through Asia towards us. You may be beaten, tortured, even shot, made to sing "The East is Red." And you know, there's only one colour on the red flag. We had the Vietnam War and were desperately selling off our mineral wealth to foreigners, unlike Norway, trying to appease our masters and worship at the altar of international capitalism. In the former Soviet Union, as a dissident, at first you were shot, with 3 judges stamping the authorising paperwork. Later, you were sent away to a gulag in Siberia, where you might not survive the trip, let alone your stay. Then a lunatic asylum, but finally, if you were lucky, you might live your days away in an anonymous township in Siberia in relative peace and irrelevance. The world's greatest then living geneticist, Nikolai Vavilov, died in a Soviet gulag. It wasn't good. If you escaped, the red carpet was rolled out. But if you'd suffered under a government that wasn't worth criticising, either allied to the West or not really a significant international player, you were irrelevant. It wasn't that you were badly treated, but rather that you were badly treated by people we didn't like. Similarly, it didn't matter if you were badly treated by China, till it became important for other reasons. And while in the US things never got this bad, there were the McCarthy witch hunts and withholding treatment for syphilis from a group of US blacks, just to see what would happen. Amongst other problems in our history, we've had the Indonesian mass killings, noted in the film The Act of Killing, and the Balibo 5. Still, keep in mind, while our present greatest concern is with the Liberal Party, a lot of these things happened on Labor's watch. And Labor has in fact waved through a lot of this obnoxious legislation. And for sure, both political parties will twist logic and abuse words when it suits their purpose. Can you remember Ruddisms? And look, let's take a pause. From time to time, in fact more often than by accident, our foreign policy has actually helped. When it's not too expensive, not too hard, and doesn't annoy someone we're fawning up to. We cycle bureaucrats on sabbatical to help neighbouring governments. Sometimes we actually build stuff they need as compared to it being a hidden subsidy for our own construction firms. And it would be nice if our foreign aid budget was actually at the UN recommended level. But the thing is, all this good does not compensate for the bad because of just how bad the bad is. But for sure, this other part of the picture needs to be acknowledged. But let me close by saying, foreign policy is a way of being an arsehole, of abusing the truth, of flexing your muscles, and doing so while beating your chest to claim credibility. This is true regardless of the nation concerned, be it China, or the US, or even Australia. I can imagine some will be critical of me for criticising too much or too little. But in criticising China, this does not mean that we thereby endorse the US, or even our own foreign policy, nor do we deny our own hypocrisies. Surely, we can think about more than one thing at a time. Our foreign policy is riddled with self-interest and contradiction. In the Pirate Party, we want to be principled. We want to be sure we're not doing the dirty on our neighbours and are not selectively supporting Australians overseas based on who we'd be pissing off. Please support the Pirate Party so we can all take a stand for what's right, rather than doing what's politically or economically convenient at the time. Thank you.